Today, we step into a story filled with prejudice, resilience, and a chance for redemption. This story begins with Chloe Harper, a seasoned lead flight attendant who takes great pride in her professionalism and principles. On Flight SW-341 from Clearwater to Aurora, Chloe expected a routine, peaceful journey as always. But everything changed the moment she noticed a middle-aged passenger wearing a red hat with the words, "Make America Great Again," MAGA, embroidered across the front. A sense of unease settled in Chloe as she noticed the wary glances and quiet discomfort of nearby passengers. And in a split second, driven by emotion, Chloe made a decision that would cost her everything, because the calm man in the red hat was none other than Benjamin Wells, chairman of the Skywings Board of Directors. What seemed like an ordinary few-hour flight became a turning point in Chloe's life. What happens when one mistake not only threatens her career, but also challenges the very values she has always upheld? Let's dive into this unexpected story and follow Chloe Harper's difficult journey of redemption. If you appreciate lessons about growth and the courage to overcome failure, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any meaningful stories. And if you were in Chloe's shoes, would you have acted differently? Share your thoughts in the comments. Soft background music played through the cabin speakers as passengers filed into their seats. Chloe stood at the cabin door, greeting each passenger with her well-practiced, professional smile. "Good morning. Welcome aboard. We wish you a pleasant flight. Please follow this way. Thank you." The first passengers were in a hurry, struggling to store their luggage in the overhead compartments. But soon things settled into the familiar routine. Passengers fastened their seatbelts, and the sound of buckles clicking filled the air. Chloe took a slow breath, savoring the comforting familiarity she always felt just before takeoff. She made her way down the aisle, adjusting tray tables that hadn't been stowed properly and checking the emergency exit rows. When she reached row 17, Chloe's gaze faltered. A middle-aged man sat there, dressed sharply in a brown jacket, dark jeans, and simple leather shoes. He calmly flipped through a travel magazine, seemingly at ease. But it wasn't his demeanor that caught Chloe's attention. It was the red hat on his head. The hat stood out in stark contrast to the neutral tones of the cabin interior, with bold white letters spelling out, "Make America Great Again," MAGA. Chloe froze for a moment, her heartbeat quickening. The hat wasn't just an accessory. It was a symbol tied to controversies, divisions, and even protests she had seen in the news. She forced herself to stay composed, walking past the row without betraying her inner turmoil. But inside, unease spread like a slow-burning ember. Chloe continued her safety checks, but her mind remained fixated on the red hat. When she reached the back of the plane, she stepped into the small galley, where Lisa, her longtime friend and colleague, was preparing drink trays for the passengers. Lisa glanced up and noticed the tension on Chloe's face. "What's wrong, Chloe?" Lisa asked, concern in her voice. Chloe crossed her arms and exhaled deeply. "Did you see the hat the passenger in 17C is wearing?" Lisa blinked for a second, then nodded in recognition. "Oh, the MAGA hat. Yeah, I saw it. Why?" Chloe lowered her voice, as if she was confessing a secret. "I'm worried it might cause an issue. Symbols like that tend to make people uncomfortable. What if someone complains?" Lisa put the water tray down and looked Chloe directly in the eye. "Chloe, it's just a hat. We can't judge someone just because of what they're wearing. If he's sitting quietly and not bothering anyone, there's no reason for us to intervene." Chloe bit her lip, her gaze wavering. "But what if someone feels offended?" Lisa gently placed a hand on Chloe's shoulder. "Our job is to keep things harmonious and safe, not to police people's beliefs or symbols. Don't let personal feelings get in the way of your professionalism." Chloe remained silent for a few seconds. She knew Lisa was right, but the uneasiness in her chest refused to leave. The plane's engines hummed as the captain's voice came over the intercom, announcing preparations for takeoff. Chloe adjusted her neck scarf, took a deep breath, and walked back into the cabin. She reminded herself to stay neutral, but her eyes instinctively drifted back to seat 17C, where the man in the red hat continued flipping through the last few pages of his magazine, unbothered. The cabin door closed, and the engines roared louder as the plane accelerated down the runway. Chloe glanced out the window, where the morning sun cast a golden glow across the endless stretch of tarmac. In her heart, a strange, unshakable tension rippled like an unseen wave. Everything will be fine, she told herself. But deep down, she knew this flight was about to be anything but ordinary. The announcement from the cockpit came over the speakers. "We are preparing for takeoff. Please fasten your seatbelts and switch your phones to airplane mode." The plane began to taxi slowly down the runway. Passengers quietly adjusted their posture, preparing for the familiar slight rumble as the plane left the ground. Chloe took a deep breath to steady herself, feeling the growing vibrations of the engines. She walked down the aisle between the rows of seats, her professional smile in place as she passed by passengers' gazes. Yet her eyes kept sneaking glances towards seat 17C. The middle-aged man in the red MAGA hat sat quietly, his expression calm and unreadable, as though he had no idea he was the center of attention. Suddenly, there was a small ding from row 16D as a passenger pressed the call button. Chloe quickly approached and leaned down with a friendly smile. "Hello, how can I assist you?" The woman in the seat, who appeared to be in her early 40s and dressed elegantly in a gray blazer, looked at Chloe with an awkward yet determined expression. "That hat." The woman glanced toward the row behind her, where the man in the MAGA hat was seated. "It's making me very uncomfortable. I don't want to see it for the entire flight." The woman's words lit a slow-burning fire inside Chloe, which suddenly flared up. She tilted her head slightly and kept her voice calm and measured. "I understand how you feel. I'll do my best to handle the situation appropriately." The woman gave a slight nod, as if trusting Chloe to make her feel at ease. Chloe straightened up, took a deep breath, and headed toward the back galley to think through her next move. Lisa was organizing the drink trays and noticed the tension on Chloe's face. "You're still thinking about that hat, aren't you?" Lisa asked, her tone a mix of concern and caution. Chloe nodded, gripping the edge of the counter as though trying to ground herself. "A passenger just complained. She said it's making her uncomfortable." Lisa paused, her expression contemplative. "So, what are you planning to do?" Chloe sighed. "I don't know. Part of me feels like if I don't do anything, that woman will think we're ignoring her concerns. But if I ask him to take off the hat, is that the right thing to do?" Lisa placed a hand on Chloe's shoulder, her voice gentle but firm. "Chloe, remember this. Our job is to serve, not to judge or enforce personal beliefs. He has every right to wear that hat. Unless he's being disruptive or breaking the rules, we can't ask him to change just because someone else feels uncomfortable." Chloe nodded slightly, but her eyes still showed uncertainty. She glanced toward the distant row where the red hat stood out like a bright beacon. "I have to act. Doing nothing could make things worse," Chloe told herself as she walked back into the cabin, her posture straight and her expression resolute. She stopped in front of seat 17C and leaned down with the most professional smile she could manage. "Excuse me, sir. May I have a word with you?" The man looked up, his eyes calm but sharp. "Of course. What can I do for you?" Chloe took another deep breath and spoke in a gentle but clear tone. "Your hat. Some passengers have mentioned feeling uncomfortable seeing it. I'd like to ask if you would consider removing it for the duration of the flight to help maintain a peaceful atmosphere in the cabin." The man remained silent for a few seconds. He calmly placed his magazine on his lap and gave a small, polite smile. "Thank you for letting me know. But this is just a hat, a personal item that I like and always bring with me on flights. I don't believe it's bothering anyone." Chloe furrowed her brow slightly but kept her voice steady. "I understand. But in sensitive situations like this, we hope for cooperation from all passengers to help the flight go smoothly." The man leaned back in his seat, his gaze unwavering. "You're asking me to change who I am just because of someone else's opinion, aren't you? I'm simply sitting here, enjoying my flight, not bothering anyone." The cabin felt frozen in time. Nearby passengers subtly tilted their heads to listen. Curiosity piqued despite their attempts to appear disinterested. The quiet focus of the cabin was palpable. Chloe suppressed the rising anxiety in her chest. She knew this was a difficult decision, but she believed she was doing the right thing for the greater good. "I sincerely apologize, but if you choose not to cooperate, I will need to escalate the matter and request that you disembark." The man studied her intently during a long, drawn-out silence. But instead of reacting with anger as Chloe feared, he let out a quiet sigh and nodded. I see. If that's your decision, I won't argue. He calmly folded his magazine, stood up, and retrieved his carry-on bag from the overhead bin with a composure that felt almost surreal. Chloe watched as he walked down the aisle toward the exit, his steps steady and deliberate. She felt a fleeting sense of victory, as though she had successfully maintained control. But as the cabin door closed and the engines roared, signaling the plane's impending takeoff, a persistent question echoed in her mind. Did I really do the right thing? She walked slowly toward the rear galley, the soft taps of her leather shoes against the cabin floor, sounding small but echoing in her mind like a warning bell. Inside, Lisa stood with a concerned expression in her eyes. How did it go? Lisa asked quietly. Chloe leaned gently against the counter, trying to steady her voice, though she couldn't hide the slight tremor. He got off the plane. Lisa was silent for a few seconds before asking with a doubtful tone, no arguments? Chloe shook her head, her eyes still fixed on the cabin door that had just been closed. She recalled vividly how he had stood up, gathered his belongings, and walked away. His calmness wasn't that of someone who had just been insulted or angered. It was the demeanor of someone who had witnessed too many mistakes to even bother reacting. The cabin gradually quieted as the engines roared, lifting flight SW-341 into the vast sky. Passengers drifted into their own worlds, some reading, others closing their eyes to relax. But Chloe couldn't immerse herself in her work as usual. Lisa stepped closer, her voice low but serious. Chloe, I hate to say this, but if he was that calm, don't you think it's strange? Chloe flinched slightly. The thought had lingered in her mind since the moment he stood up. She lowered her head and admitted softly, I know. But at that moment, I didn't think I had another choice. Lisa placed a reassuring hand on Chloe's shoulder, her eyes gentle but firm. Chloe, sometimes we think we're doing the right thing to protect the majority, but maybe we're just trying to control something we don't fully understand. Are you sure he really did anything wrong? Chloe remained silent. Lisa's words hit her confidence like a heavy blow, making the cracks in her resolve even more apparent. The flight continued as planned. Chloe maintained her smile as she served drinks to passengers, but the tension was clear in the way her hands trembled slightly when she placed a cup on a tray table. Some passengers exchanged polite small talk about the weather or their work, but others whispered about the man in the red hat who had been asked to leave. The story spread quietly through the cabin like a faint breeze. A young woman whispered to her travel companion, He didn't do anything. He was just reading a magazine. So weird. The man in seat 20A muttered with a sneer, MAGA, anyone wearing that hat deserves to be kicked off. Each comment felt like an invisible knife cutting into Chloe's pride. She tried to ignore them, but the words crept into her thoughts, transforming into an endless loop of self-doubt. Chloe returned to her temporary seat, leaned back, and stared blankly into the void. Lisa quietly sat down next to her, her voice softer this time. Do you think this will end easily? Chloe closed her eyes for a brief second before opening them again, as though trying to shut out an uncomfortable truth. I hope so. But deep down, she knew it wouldn't be that simple. The 4-hour flight ended in silence, with no further incidents. As the plane touched down on the runway at Aurora, Chloe stood at the cabin door, forcing herself to smile as she bid farewell to the passengers. Thank you for flying with Sky Wings. We wish you a wonderful day. The words left her mouth automatically, like a machine. But when the last passenger had exited the cabin, she finally allowed herself to exhale deeply. She had just reached for her bag to leave when a deep voice called out from just outside the cabin, Ms. Chloe Harper? Chloe startled and turned around to see Nathaniel Reeves, the CEO of Sky Wings, standing at the exit with a stern expression. Nathaniel was a tall man with a sophisticated appearance, but his piercing gaze always made employees feel the weight of his presence. I need you to come with me now. His voice was calm, but every word carried the weight of a command that couldn't be refused. Chloe nodded nervously, feeling as though the ground beneath her had shifted. Lisa stood a few feet away, watching Chloe with a worried look. But Chloe didn't dare look back. Nathaniel led Chloe into a small conference room, minimalist and brightly lit, with white overhead lights and glass walls that provided a view of the runway outside. But Chloe paid no attention to the view. Her eyes were fixed on the file neatly placed on the table. Nathaniel pulled out a chair and spoke without preamble. "Do you know who the man you asked to leave the flight was?" Chloe's heart nearly stopped. She slowly shook her head, feeling as though every drop of blood had drained from her body. Nathaniel placed a photo on the table, the same man with the MAGA hat, his familiar calm smile captured in the image. But the words below the photo struck Chloe like a bolt of lightning. Benjamin Wells, chairman of the board, Skywings Airlines. The room fell into a deafening silence. Chloe felt as though her entire world had shattered before her eyes. The air in the conference room felt frozen in place. Chloe stared at the photo on the table, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it might burst out of her chest. Her breath seemed trapped in a single, endless moment. Chairman of the board. The words echoed over and over in her mind, like the sound reverberating through an empty room. Nathaniel Reeves sat across from her, arms folded. His face showed no emotion. But it was that very silence that made the atmosphere even heavier. "Do you realize what you've done, Chloe?" Nathaniel asked, his voice low but clear, each word piercing her like a dagger to the heart. Chloe swallowed hard, her throat dry. I didn't know who he was. I just thought I was trying to do my duty." Nathaniel placed both hands on the table, leaning slightly forward. "Your duty is to serve passengers with respect, no matter who they are or what they believe in. You let your personal feelings and prejudices dictate your decision. Mr. Wells didn't break any rules. He wasn't disruptive. He wasn't bothering anyone. But you were." His words were like a cold, sharp blade. Chloe felt each sentence splitting apart every justification she had clung to as reasonable. The room was silent again. Chloe lowered her head, her hands clenched tightly on the table. Memories of the entire flight flashed through her mind like a slow-motion film. The red hat, Mr. Wells' calm gaze, the passengers' uneasy whispers, the hollow satisfaction she'd felt when he walked off the plane, and the emptiness that followed. She took a deep breath, but her voice still trembled. "I'm sorry." Nathaniel leaned back in his chair, his eyes still sharp but devoid of anger. Instead, there was a heavy disappointment. "Chloe, an apology won't change anything at this point. Your actions didn't just damage your own reputation, they harmed the image of Skywings Airlines as a whole." Chloe felt the weight in her chest grow heavier, like lead pressing down on her heart. She knew Nathaniel wasn't exaggerating. An incident like this could turn into a media firestorm, with headlines screaming, "Flight attendant kicks airline chairman off his own flight." Nathaniel shook his head slowly. "I'm giving you two choices: resign immediately or enroll in an intensive ethics and emotional management training program for 1 year. During that time, you will be under strict supervision." The room seemed to close in on her, the invisible walls pressing tighter and tighter. Everything she had once been proud of, her professionalism, her ideals about her job, her belief that she was doing the right thing, had burst like soap bubbles in the harsh fluorescent light. She could resign. End it all here, walk out of the room, and leave the past behind her. But that would mean giving up the career she had loved since she was young. Or she could choose to make things right, even knowing that the path would be filled with scrutiny and doubt from her colleagues and passengers alike. She raised her head, her eyes red but shining with determination. I'll take the training." Nathaniel nodded slowly. "Good. But remember, Chloe, there won't be another second chance after this. I hope you'll prove that keeping you here was the right decision." As she walked out of the conference room, Chloe felt like she had just been through a storm. Everything outside seemed unbearably bright compared to the tense, suffocating atmosphere she'd just left behind. Lisa was waiting for her in the hallway, her eyes filled with concern. She stepped closer to Chloe and asked softly, "How did it go? What did they say?" Chloe looked at Lisa for a moment, then shook her head, the corners of her lips curving into a sad smile. "I'll have to start over. Learn everything from scratch." Lisa let out a quiet breath, then gently put her arm around Chloe's shoulder. Chloe, I know you can do this. You're stronger than you think. Chloe closed her eyes for a brief moment to let the comfort of those words sink in. But she knew the hardest part was still ahead, proving that her mistake could be redeemed, not through words but through actions. Chloe stepped out of the airport building, the afternoon sun shining across the wide runway. The sound of engines from other planes echoed in the clear blue sky. In that sunlight, she made a promise to herself. I won't let this mistake define me forever. Ahead of her lay an entire journey to prove that Chloe Harper wasn't just a flight attendant defined by one mistake. She was someone who knew how to rise after the most painful fall of her life. The following days felt like a prolonged nightmare. Chloe officially began an intensive training program on professional ethics, emotional control, and crisis management. Her schedule was packed from morning to night with scenario-based assessments that she had to face repeatedly. In the training room one morning, white fluorescent lights shone down on the long conference table, covered with thick stacks of documents. Chloe sat in the middle of the room, listening as the trainer posed question after question. If a passenger wears a controversial symbol that doesn't violate any regulations, how would you handle the situation? Chloe took a deep breath and responded in a calm but firm tone. I would prioritize understanding and respecting the passenger first, engaging them in a direct conversation instead of imposing my personal views. I would assess whether they're truly affecting others before making any decisions. The trainer nodded but kept a scrutinizing gaze. Chloe knew that giving the right answer wasn't enough. She needed to change from within, rebuilding her patience, empathy, and genuine respect for others. Returning to real flights after the training was another challenge altogether. When Chloe stepped into the cabin in her familiar uniform, she could feel the probing eyes of both colleagues and familiar passengers. In the rear galley, Lisa placed a hand on Chloe's shoulder and smiled encouragingly. Don't worry about them. Prove yourself by doing your job well. Chloe looked at her friend, gratitude shining in her eyes. Thank you. I won't let you down. One day, Chloe was assigned to a special flight for Skywing's senior executives. When she entered the first-class cabin for the final pre-flight check, her heart clenched slightly at the sight of a familiar passenger in the front row. Benjamin Wells. He was dressed in an elegant gray suit, his expression calm yet warm as he offered her a knowing smile. Chloe took a deep breath, stepped forward, bowed slightly, and spoke in a steady voice. Welcome aboard, Mr. Wells. Thank you for choosing Skywings. Benjamin nodded, his sharp gaze softened by warmth. Ms. Harper, I've heard that you completed your training with excellence. Chloe maintained her composure, though a wave of emotion welled up inside her. I've learned a lot, sir, and I sincerely apologize for what happened before. Benjamin was silent for a few seconds before replying, I know. The important thing is that you learn from your mistake. Not everyone has the courage to acknowledge their errors and change. His gentle smile felt like a weight being lifted from Chloe's shoulders. She bowed her head in gratitude before continuing her duties. Throughout the flight, Chloe worked with greater focus and care than ever before. Not a single detail escaped her attention. Every glass of water, every napkin was served with genuine dedication. When the plane landed, Benjamin Wells exited the first-class cabin, but before leaving, he stopped and turned to Chloe. Ms. Harper, I'm pleased to see you back at work. I hope you'll continue to do even better. Chloe bowed again, her eyes glistening but filled with unwavering determination. Thank you, sir. I won't let you down. Flight SW-341 had ended, but Chloe Harper's journey was far from over, a journey of growth, courage, and redemption. Not everyone has the clarity to recognize their mistakes, and even fewer have the bravery to make amends when the world is watching with doubt. But when it does happen, incredible transformations can begin. Chloe Harper proved that a person's worth isn't defined by past mistakes, but by how they rise and grow from their failures. And Benjamin Wells, with his compassion and ability to see the true nature of people, gave Chloe a second chance, a testament to the fact that forgiveness can sometimes hold more power than any punishment. If you were moved by Chloe's journey, hit like. If you believe this story should be shared to inspire others, hit share. And don't forget to subscribe to continue following us for more inspiring stories. Every small action you take gives us the motivation to keep bringing you more meaningful and human-centered stories.